Welcome back to another DA62 days around the world. We'll continue on from our last landing earlier this morning, technically, but for me it was effectively last night. We landed at Shemya over here in sort of the very, very beginnings or end, you might say, of the Aleutian Island chain. And today we're going to be taking off sort of in the very, very early part of the morning, flying through the sunrise and sort of island hopping our way along, going to be much lower. Land for about approximately 7,000 feet for the majority of the journey. We may pop down occasionally to check out some scenery and whatnot if there is anything particularly interesting, but I think we'll get a pretty good view from where we are while still making reasonably good time. We're going to head along and try and land over here at Atka. Now, we're doing something a little bit different today. I'll bring over my my partially pre-filled little thing here. We're going from Shemya to Atka, as I think 832 kilometers is the expected distance, although we're not going in a straight line, and estimated flight time of 2 hours and 41 minutes. Now, what I'm planning on doing is actually starting with a lower fuel to test out how my various averages here are working. So the average number of kilometers we get per percentage point of fuel used is currently 16.2. That's the average of all of those. Now, some of them were flying low and quite hard, some were high and more fuel efficient. So it's a bit of a distorted average. We're going to be flying fairly low. So I'm taking the average, which is, again, an average, a mid-range one. I'm rounding it down slightly to 15, which will give us more fuel, which brings us to 55% expected for that distance. And I'm then rounding that up to 60, so we have ourselves a small buffer. Now, the game is... there are bugs in this. There's certain issues here that I'm not sure. It says I have sufficient. More than sufficient range to reach it, but that's flying most optimally. And even then, it's always been a struggle to get that kind of efficiency. So I find the game tends to be a little bit incorrect with its predictions. So if we do run out of fuel, if things are looking pretty dire, we do have a fallback here at Atka that we can land at, which is about 2/3 of the way, maybe even close to 3/4 of the way along the entire journey. So we should guarantee to have enough fuel to at least reach Atka, and I'm pretty confident, according to my spreadsheet, that we should make Atka as well. Now, one of the reasons I say that the game is incorrect in a lot of these things is you have a quick look at the nav log, and this estimated time here of 2 hours and 41 minutes travel time is based on these speeds here, which cannot be correct, mainly because the plane, one, flies in knots, and if these were knots, the average the cruising speed of this plane is between 165 and 171 true airspeed knots, true airspeed. Now, if I just put in this one here, this coming in for a descent, that's actually below the stall speed of the plane. If I convert that over to knots, I'll just bring up a web page over here where I have actually converted it over, and you'll see that at 139 kilometers per hour, we're at 75, which if I've got the flaps down, it's fine, but that is with no flaps. That is actually below the stall speed. So I really don't think that these times, these times here match up with those being kilometers per hour. I think that is a coding error on Asobo's side, and what it is because I'm running a hybrid kilometers and knots and everything in feet, that it just hasn't converted over the actual amounts and instead simply changed the unit there incorrectly. So I'm going to assume that they're going to be knots, which is the normal cruising speed of this plane. And the times then should add up correctly. So there's a few issues, but we will make it go. Now let's jump on in and see how we go. Now this stream is not going to be quite so quiet and relaxing. It's still going to be a very relaxing stream, but we're going to have a little bit of daylight. There's going to be some more beautiful things to look at, and that might be a little bit more vocal during the flight rather than simply having it sit there and do nothing at all. Try to enjoy the views. Now I don't think we'll see anything quite like that. We're just going to have a look and see what we encounter. Again, taking off on these very, very bright lights. Landing last night was difficult, and one issue I do have is that there is no parking area for this, so unfortunately I can't start cold and dark. The plane is it's running. It's a typical runway start, which is unfortunately all I've got to work with, but we will work with it as we can.
Papa Alpha Sierra Yankee
We'll be heading 109 degrees, so let's just quick look down here what we've got. Some instruments up and some lights in here. And we will head in. That is a very washed out looking thing. The floodlights on. Have a look here. We got sufficient fuel. Things are looking reasonable. I'm going to want an altitude of 7,000 feet. We can go effectively take off straight away and jump onto the nav point. So I'm not concerned about all that. I don't need to worry about heading because we can manually bring us in, or we go onto the autopilot. Let me just have a look what we've got here. Pumps are off. I don't need any of those. Okay, I think we are ready to start. With air traffic control, get this one up, and get that floodlight down so we're nice and dark. Well, I think we're ready to go here. We'll throttle up and begin the takeoff procedure. Jump straight onto autopilot. We're going to 1,000 feet. That's close to the maximum climb rate, which is about 1,150 feet a minute, I think, with both engines active. So we'll stick to about 1,000. A little bit aggressive, but we'll jump straight onto the nav line as well. Nav mode is on, and let's actually jump outside and have a quick look at around. Can we see anything? No, we cannot. Not yet, but we're going to be flying into the sunrise, so I'm planning on actually enjoying that. Once we get a little bit of height, we should begin to see it on the horizon, probably within the next 10 minutes of flight time. Meanwhile, I'm going to lift flaps, yes, in the flight, and I will cut the bike, relax a little bit until we get something a little bit more visually appealing. just to draw your attention to any of the flight sims out there who aren't aware of how to do this. You go into the cockpit, you can actually pop out these windows as I've done here, and they become completely independent and separate from the actual Microsoft Flight Sim window. So I can put that onto a second monitor, and it freely moves around. Effectively allows me to see that and see that either when in cockpit, I can have it on my other monitor when I'm looking somewhere else. I can glance down, because in reality one can simply glance down at any point without having to move their entire head down. But also if I'm out in this screen here, which again we can't see much at the moment, but it simply allows me to keep an eye on all the various things. And so typically what I'm watching is things like fuel flow, per hour, how long I've got, the estimated endurance, which is how long we can stay in the air for, and, again, given our current fuel burn and whatnot. And what was, let me just pull up the data on my other screen. So we're looking at just short of a 3-hour total flight time. So the fact that we've got 5 hours of endurance really gives me confidence that I've packed more than sufficient fuel, and I can begin to refine my accuracy with fuel use going forward. At the moment, I'm only carrying the minimum required plus a small little boost on top of that. That's part of what I'm hoping to achieve with this spreadsheet that I've shown a few times on the screen. I typically show it at the end of the screen and a little bit at the beginning. One thing I will just put the pitot heat on, because we are it's -5 degrees outside. So if we start flying through some clouds or other sort of high humidity sections of air, we might begin to develop a little device on our pitot tubes. But I'm not going to leave these here the whole time, but this gives a rough idea of what I'm looking at on the other screen when I'm actually sitting back and enjoying the Starfield view. So I can still keep an eye on things. One of the main things is the estimated time of arrival of, what does E stand for? Estimated time of, I don't know, stands for something, arrival. About when I'm actually reaching my next nav point, which in this case is 114 and a bit nautical miles away. And given our current speed, we should get there in roughly 40 minutes. But this is a bit like those old-fashioned, internet download speed estimates. It'll jump around, as you can see here, quite wildly based on speed and a whole range of other factors. So currently we've got a variable crosswind with a very slight bit of headwind coming in. We jump in and actually get it off the screen and look down properly at it. If we start looking at the wind here and see that a very, very small amount of headwind and mostly crosswind coming in, but it is varying quite a bit. So that will actually change this, because we're so far out. We've only covered a small percentage so far. This can be quite erratic until we get a little bit closer. We're also changing our speed. We'll see our speed is gradually climbing simply because the throttle is so high, and we're currently in quite thick atmosphere. So the props have some good bite to them. I will actually, I'll keep an eye on this total fuel burn. I'm going to bring the throttle down. So currently 10.5, and that's per engine. So we're currently looking at 21 gallons per hour. So we're burning quite a lot of fuel right now. I definitely want to bring that down. So I have to jump out here in order to actually see the throttle lever percentage, because there doesn't appear to be any in two things at once. Doesn't appear to be any sort of in cockpit view or way telling it this load percentage is always at 100%. There's no other real way to know where my levers are, and short of looking at the real thing, I can left click that. 85%, 85%. I've got to be very, very careful I don't accidentally move my mouse while I'm doing that, and quite frankly it's not an easy or intuitive way of doing it. Much easier to just jump out, look at the lever percentage and jump back in. Either way, things are looking good. I'm going to keep watching these screens, and if anything happens, we will hopefully catch the sunrise. just to reiterate what I covered earlier in the stream at the beginning. So this current flight, we started off with 60% fuel, so we're currently down to 50%, running at 85% throttle, which is still relatively high, but I'm quite comfortable with this speed, and this is given a small climb rate as well, so we're sort of going up around the typical cruise speed of about 170, I think, TAS on the ground, airspeed. So going back to this one here, what I've done is using the number of kilometres that I normally cover per percentage point of fuel, rather than calculating the number of litres required. I've used this one here as a more simple metric. That's our average. Now that flight was long and fuel efficient. This one here and that one there, and even that one to some extent, were much higher, longer, slower flights over long distances where I tried to be more fuel efficient. Whereas some of them, for example, this one here, only got 13 kilometres per percentage point of fuel, mainly because I was doing from Zamami to Toshima, I was doing a sort of a low, even my speed was lower, doing a much lower flight near the ground, sightseeing and looking at a whole bunch of things. There are a few sort of steep climbs in there just for the fun of it, which again burns down a lot of the fuel. So what I'm doing this time is taking an average. It's a fairly conservative average because I can get much better fuel efficiency. So I've got that safety margin built in. Up to that, I'm now rounding it down to 15, which based on the number of kilometres we're doing would mean I need about 55% of fuel. So I'm then rounding it up again to 60%, give me a nice, I guess a nice comfortable buffer. That really lets me go quite far. I'm guaranteed to, well, I think I'm guaranteed, the game says I'm guaranteed to make it. So I'll have a quick look, bring over, I'll go inside the cockpit, it might be easier to see. I'll go in here and pull the range out and see my target over here is Atka, it is called? Oh no, Pact. Yeah, it's the Atka Island or something. And I've got fuel, the game estimates I've got fuel to take me out to about here. That's a pretty good margin already. But what I've got, it's harder to see. I'll try and go in a little bit, just over near here. One of these islands along here, about maybe 3/4 of the way, might be even up here a little bit, about 3/4 of the way over the entire flight. There is another airport that I can land at, and if my fuel is starting to get critically low by that juncture, then I can land there and call a flight to an end, or even just do a touch and go and refuel on the ground and then continue on to the destination. I've got a little bit of time this evening, so that's sort of why I'm attempting to take a smaller amount of fuel. If you've got any other questions though, let me know, otherwise we'll just continue flying along. To add in one more thing, because you did the question, what I'm looking at is the actual manual of the plane itself, and so I'm looking at based on a heavier plane. I don't know the exact simulated weight of this plane, but I'm basing it off the heavier of the two flight charts. This is the lighter one, below 2,000 kilograms. This one is between 2,000 and 2,300. So I'm using the fuel charts based on that, and these are the estimated burns for a given throttle percentage, power percentage, at a given altitude based on weather conditions. I'm basing it off ISA. It's a little bit cooler here, and cooler air does tend to give, it's more dense. It gives you better results on average, so it'll be closer to this side here. But I'm using this one here to be, again, a bit more conservative about it. We're now heading towards 12,000 feet, so I would hope to have somewhere, an indicated, a true airspeed of somewhere between those two numbers, and again a fuel burn between those two there. So we go back in, we're looking at basically between 15 and 19. I'll bring that O back off. We'll have a look at current fuel burn is 8.3, so we're currently doing 16.6. So 16.6 we've got, and what's our current speed? Is 166. We're still climbing, so that will pick up in time. But what we should be doing, 12,000 feet, we should be looking 14 to 19. So we're within the expected amount, given our 85% throttle. That's 75. That's 95. So we are sort of in between the middle there. So our fuel burn is spot on, and our speed's a little bit low, but that's because we're still climbing. I imagine. Let's have a look at it again. We're heading up to, we're edging towards 170 as this climb is finishing now. So 170, we should be expecting between 171 and 189. We'll just we'll monitor how this goes, just to make sure that we're getting the expected performance out of this plane. And currently, so far we are. Now we've got a little bit of crosswind, so we're flying. You can see there we're not perfectly in line with our nav point. With a little bit of bend off like that, what's going to happen? We're going to lose some total fuel efficiency and ground speed in the ideal direction we're trying to go. So we're wasting some energy staying on track. That's fairly negligible in the grand scheme of things, and it's why I've got the large buffer, so that even if everything goes wrong, fly inefficiently, pretty much guaranteed. But part of the reason we did go up here was to see if there was any sunlight there, and it does not appear to be. I may have really miscalculated the time of day, so my apologies for that. If you're hoping for something more beautiful, I was certainly hoping to be able to see these islands as we flew over them, but perhaps the sun will come up shortly. Failing that, I could attempt to move things here. Currently using live weather. Where will I move? There we go. Move there. We'll move it forward a little bit in time, so we're closer to. That looks like, is that the sun or is it it's the moon? Like the moonrise coming up. That is interesting. I'm going to move this forward just a little bit more, and just trying to figure out what's going on. I expected there to be a bit of sun quite quickly. Yeah, it's the moon going up. Oh well, look, I'll leave the moon there. We'll move forward in time slightly. Then we've been flying, and not very bright. We'll just give it a tad more. Really was hoping to have a more well lit day. Oh no, so I see we're several hours away from sunrise. That is interesting. Must have obviously mixed things up. That there. Now, this is what I was expecting us to be flying through. Sort of light stuff like this. There's a bit of cloud, but we might actually drop down below the cloud shortly and look at this island. We're coming up here over Kiska Island, which is part of the Rat Island. So we're going to see these couple of little islands over here. These are collectively known as the Rat Islands, which are some Aleutian Islands, sort of the beginnings of it, far out from the tip of Alaska. And it's actually a special island wilderness area. So there's no permanent population out here, and to go and visit, you actually need a special permit to go out there. So quite a stunning sort of wildlife area. I think it was discovered back in the 1700s or something like that. So a long time ago, by the Russians, I believe. And it was actually during World War II. It was occupied by the Japanese, and then I believe counter-invaded later on in the war. So it's such a remote sort of a almost worthless sort of area from a say a modern industrial perspective. It has seen its sort of fair share of attention over the years. It's quite an interesting sort of little area, and quite beautiful. I'm just going to bring up the sun a little bit more. I'm not hugely bothered with changing the daylight hours too much there. That's a little bit nice. I do like that. It might allow us to appreciate some of the natural beauty as we watch the sunrise come out. And actually it's stunningly beautiful over there. Lighting. It hasn't really lit up the island too much, but we can appreciate it for what it is, and then fly on and continue our journey. On our left here is this sort of the large volcanic peak of Segula Island. And Segula Island, again, relatively protected area. You can't head out here. It's got no permanent populations or anything like that through any of the Rat Islands. But they're nesting auks here, which is sort of like a puffin or a sort of a bird. They can fly. I think the only one that couldn't fly was what's called the great auk, which is now extinct. But auks can fly, so like a small water bird of some sort, like a puffin or a flying penguin type thing. Hard to describe, but quite an important little nature reserve out here. Just up here we've got Kvostov and Davidoff Island. Now these are believed to be part of an old volcano. They're sort of long since worn down, but long time ago, as in like dinosaur age and stuff, pre-dinosaurs. This was believed to be a huge volcano. It sort of erupted and it's blowing out bits of it in like a massive eruption, and they're sort of the remnants of the older volcano ring. So I found that quite interesting. If you interest in geology is probably something that would interest you, but if you're only here for the plains, oh, just enjoy the grand tour. As you're coming up further, we've got, I believe that's Little Sitkin Island. I'm actually going to have to double check. I don't know enough of the Aleutians. Yes, so my map's saying that there's a Little Sitkin Island coming up here, and I don't actually know much about Little Sitkin, I think. If I can find something online about it. Oops. Get that key. Yeah, it doesn't look like anything particularly interesting. It's a whole big Wikipedia entry for it. But Little Sitkin is it's sort of an old volcanic island by the looks of it. I imagine most of the islands along this whole area being on sort of the northern end of the Ring of Fire, which wraps around the Pacific. You know, sort of Japan and stuff in the west, and the west coast of the US on the eastern side is, and this is sort of up the northern part of it. So it's all quite volcanically active along here. So I imagine this is just another volcano. It may still be active, but I don't believe that these ones here are active anymore. Although, you never know. I suppose nothing stops them from rupturing and erupting at some point, but most likely it would come through one of these points over here. But there's some interesting islands down here to our right as well. I don't know all of these. I think they're still part of the Rat Islands. But again, nobody lives out here. It's just a beautiful sightseeing tour. And again, that sunrise over here is just absolutely stunning as it's coming up over the clouds. So sit back, I'll be quiet and enjoy the view a bit more. Well, I had hoped we'd be able to see Semi-Sochponoi. I can't even pronounce that, but some Semi-Sochponoi Island. I think we're just coming under the clouds here, although we are dangerously low. We need to be very careful because there's quite a number of mountain peaks here. But this is arguably, depending on semantics and whatnot, considered by some people to be the most easternmost part of the United States, continental US as well. So I suppose they don't necessarily call it a continent, but what happens is we're very, very close to the international date line. So just to the slightly further east this island, where the international date line is. So technically, if you look at it on a big map, split down the date line, then this is as far east on that map as you would go, and then obviously the US main part is further to the west. So bit of an odd sort of a thing, but quite an interesting island, at least from a trivia point like that. One other thing as well, we've missed out seeing Mount Cerberus, which is somewhere over here, sort of the south central part of the island. It is no longer called Mount Cerberus. President Joe Biden, after signing into law a bill proposed by, I believe it was someone from Alaska, to rename it Mount Young. So Mount Cerberus is gone. It no longer exists. It is now Mount Young, named after a long-serving senator who died fairly recently. So I guess we're not going to see Mount Cerberus. Although at this point, with these clouds, I don't think we're seeing much of anything at all. And this is certainly not the mountainous island I was expecting. I suspect Bing Maps is being Bing Maps again, and they've just completely failed to include any sort of elevation for this, which is a little bit unfortunate, but which is the way of things. Either way, I'm going to fly down below these clouds for a little while, and then as we start to get over the ocean again, I will bring us back up to a more fuel-efficient cruising altitude. Unfortunately, yes, I think that is just a painted texture. I don't really see any real elevation here, unfortunately, which is a little bit of a letdown. Oh, there might be a small amount just over there, but that doesn't really match the image below it. A little 3D I can see, and at 3,000 feet we should be seeing, I would think, quite a bit more. Only a kilometre up in the air. Oh well. And just appearing up here to the right of, in front of us here is Mount Garraloy Island. It's quite a high mountain. I believe it's roughly about 5,000 feet, give or take. Again, I'd have to do some reading to really catch up with all my mountain ranges in the area, but it's about 5,000 to 6,000 feet. I believe there's another one up further, which is just over 6,000 feet, so slightly higher than Mount Garraloy. But this is another one of those sort of an uninhabited island out in the area, and I do believe there's a whole bunch of those little auks, those sort of small puffin type birds I mentioned earlier, living along here as well. So it's quite an important nature reserve. There's no humans out there for a long time, and a lot of the animals are out there just living their best life, I guess. Forgot to mention as well, one of the earlier islands we passed back there, I think it was the big flat one with Mount Cerberus. That one actually been used for fox. Arctic foxes have been brought out there to be farmed for their fur, and as a result, they wiped out all of the small mammals, native mammals in the island. So there are no native mammals on the island anymore. Not this one, one of the earlier ones. And so it's quite interesting. The US has sort of done a program to eradicate them all, and I think they're sort of slowly trying to restore a lot of these islands back to their sort of natural state as much as possible, remove the human influence. There are a couple coming up. So we've got Atka Island, we've got Tanaga Island coming up shortly, then we've got Atka Island after that, which is a large airbase built on it. I'll probably cover that once we get a little bit closer to it. But Adak and then Atka further on, which is our destination, both have small populations on them, probably combined fewer than 500 people, I would imagine. Again, I'd have to look up the exact numbers, and I might do that as we get closer. Just relying on memory for my illusions knowledge is probably not the best idea. A few interesting facts out this way, and I might even look them up and just relay them. Anyway, there's Mount Garraloy. Beautiful, beautiful mountain, and again, another volcano, being that we are on the northern edge of the Ring of Fire.
Anchorage Center BLXC 445 is type Diamond DA62 6,500 feet. Request flight following.
BLXC 445 Anchorage Center. Squawk 5463. BLXC 445, please acknowledge. BLXC 445 radar contact 6,800 feet. QNH tree 0.21.
Roger BLXC 445.
Given that we're coming over and the US has a recent track record of blowing things out of the sky that come in unannounced, I've decided that although we don't look like a balloon, I would still announce myself as we begin approaching these more built-up areas. Now, coming up on the left here, it's sort of hard to see a little bit behind the clouds there, but actually quite striking is that large peak I was talking about, Atka Island. Now, this is quite a large sort of an island. I think it's in the top 30, I think, largest islands in the US, and it's last erupted back in the beginning of World War One. So back, I think it was 1914 or 1915 was its last eruption, and it's had a number of eruptions in the past, but it's not expected to sort of be exploding anytime soon, I don't think. Quite a stunning area. It's quite a funny shaped island. If we pull it up here as well, it's, you sort of see that's the main volcanic peak we're seeing up there, but there's a whole bunch of other areas down there which are sort of more obviously being pushed up by lava flows over the eons, as you'd say. Quite an odd shape, and it doesn't really look like it's a large super volcano that's gone off, so perhaps it's just gradually built up and peaks that have joined together and eroded down over the time, over the years. Quite a beautiful thing. We're going to fly just to the right of the peak, the main high peak, and over the centre of the island before turning up and beginning to head across to Atka Island. Now we've just passed Atka Island, finishing it off here. Ahead of us is Atka Island, and that there I believe is Atka volcano. So another uninhabited island. It's sort of fairly long. There's only the real sort of point up there, or peak over there, stratovolcano. And now my textbooks say that it last erupted in 1994. However, a quick Google search online showed that it sort of supposedly erupted also in 2012. Now I'm not aware of that. I guess my books are a bit out of date. My geological knowledge is somewhat old-fashioned, but you can see it's a fairly volcano, still continuously erupting probably every 15 or 20 years by the sounds of things. Probably little spurts. I don't think it's covering huge, not like the big Tongan volcano a few years back, but certainly enough to probably at least reach, I imagine, Adak Island, which is coming up just over here. My notes here say that it's just short of 4,300 feet, so again, us travelling at 6,500 feet, we're well clear of going, and we're actually not going to go past or directly over the peak. We're going to continue by just heading off just to the side of it, so we get a nice good view as we fly past. I might even do an in-cockpit view as we fly past that one, if the visuals are any good. The Aleutian Islands are actually named after the people who live here, the Aleuts. Now, I believe that's a Russian term. I think they call themselves Unagan or something like that. Unagan, which is, I believe, also where Unalaska comes from, which is, I guess, the Aleutian part of Alaska. People, there's about 25,000 of them back in, before European contact. The Russians came in and brought some diseases, and of course the Americans came in, with trade and whatnot. So the people have suffered a fair bit, but there's still a fair few of them around. I believe, what have I got here? A little bit of information coming up. Let's have a quick scan through. Look, there seems to be about 12,000 people who identify in the last US census, who identify as Aleut. And living all through here, I believe Atka Island has a fair few number of them, and there are about 6,000 or 7,000 of them living in Alaska proper. So there's a small scattering of people, but they're very, very small. I don't imagine there's a huge amount of agriculture up here, so they would have lived much like the Inuit people, similar sort of a lifestyle, fishing and hunting for meat and whatnot, and scavenging what they could. Not to denigrate their lifestyle, it's clearly something that kept them going for a long, long time. And the European, settlements, both Russians and then the US moving up in later years, certainly disrupted a lot of their lifestyle, and so there are far fewer of them now than there used to be. So while most populations around the world have drastically increased in the last, say, 200 years, 150 years, the Aleut people have actually declined to just short of half what they used to be in that intervening time. And not that there is believed to be any danger of them going culturally extinct, although of the three languages they did speak, one of them is functionally extinct now, and the other two, although they're used, and a lot of the young people don't speak them fluently anymore. So it's one of those interesting things, the big sort of cultural effect of I guess the US being so close and being part of the US. They do sort of gradually lose some of those old cultural traditions. So it's interesting, and I find it quite interesting. A lot of these old sort of niche is the wrong word again. I don't really have the language to describe what I'm thinking here, but it's sort of getting in touch with the roots here. These people have lived up here on this land for thousands and thousands and thousands of years, and really until European infectious diseases came in, they were a good stable of the population, and many of them have died off, almost 50%, and that's not accounting for any potential population growth that may have occurred in the intervening 150 years or so. It really is quite sad that I guess learning their history and respecting it, and actually looking at what we're flying over is a part of why I want to do this world journey. I actually want to experience and read up and take the time to study a lot of these cultures and places and landmarks and bits of geography that we're flying over. And anyone who wants to come along, you're welcome to continue join. If you've got questions, feel free to drop them in chat. Otherwise, I will just continue to talk to myself and I guess diary document my own flying experience. Actually coming up here on Atka Island as well. So Atka Island, I did mention briefly in an earlier monologue as we were flying over Tanaga and Kanaga Islands. Atka Island was during World War II. So when the Japanese took some of the far western parts of the Aleutians, which was, I believe, the first land invasion of the US since 1812 of a foreign power, the Americans built quite a large airbase at Atka, which still stands to this day. They've got several, I think they've got 2 runways, and this is why this was one of my fallback options if I needed to divert. It's a very, very easy to land that runway, well maintained. There's nav beacons and whatnot to guide me down if required. So if this cloud cover were to get too severe, I could go IFR. And it's quite a well maintained island. I believe it's got a population of 300 people or something like that, given the last US census. I think they all live in just the one city or town or whatever you'd call that of Adak here. The one we're going to land at, Atka Island, has I think only a skeleton crew, a tiny population of perhaps a few dozen. So we're going to the smaller of the 2 islands, and that's part of what I've been attempting to do on this flight as well, is trying to land at sort of lesser known smaller islands or airfields where possible. Anyway, flying over Atka. I might actually start to drop down shortly just so we can continue to appreciate some of the views here. I'll bring this down to, we should be safe at 2,500 feet. Bring us down quite quickly just so we don't miss too much of what we're looking at here. Are we going down? We are going down. Ease off the throttle slightly as well. And just try and catch what we're looking at here. We are going to miss most of this island, unfortunately. This cloud cover is rolling and it's quite thick. It's stunning and beautiful to fly above them. I don't want to miss all the views down the bottom as well. Mindful that we've got more than sufficient fuel for our destination, which is, let me have a quick look. It is about 25 minutes away. So that's the next marker is 20 minutes away. And then another sort of 5 or 10 minutes to come in and land. We are getting very, very close. We'll look at our nav log. Estimated 2 hours and 20 minutes. We've got a little bit slower than average, probably to do with the climbs I've done. You know, dropping down and reclimbing again and cutting the throttle a few times. But we are pretty much on time. We're doing quite nicely here. And more than sufficient fuel. Considering we started at 60%, we've only used 2/3 of our fuel. So, to here. And, I don't think we're going to see much of Atka Island, unfortunately. That must be the island, that must be the town. I have no idea. No idea. Oh, there you go. That's the airport right there. So quite a well-maintained airport. If we did, and if we were down to yellow or red, I might have considered landing there and refueling a little bit. We have more than sufficient fuel to carry us through to the end. And we will pop in below these clouds and just see what we see on the other side. Interesting little factoid that we're flying past that little small island off the distance there, I believe, based on this map here, that's Kasatochi Island. And it erupted, I think, in 2007 or 2008. And prior to that, it was a massive wildlife sanctuary, again, being the wrong word, but a wildlife zone. There were huge numbers of birds and avian predators, what do you call them? Ocean animals, marine animals and whatnot, and huge numbers of plants and whatnot, living low on the slopes. And then the eruption in 2008 basically wiped the vast majority of it out. There probably is still a few things left there, but massive eruption. I think it sent clouds of ash plumes up, something like 30 or 40,000 feet. So almost double the surface ceiling of this aircraft we're currently in. Way up in the sky, huge amounts of ash, and it just wiped out the vast majority of all life there. So it's effectively a sterile rock in the middle of the ocean at the moment. Change over time. And the animals and birds will fly from these other islands over there over time, and it will gradually build back up again. But nature's pretty harsh, and things can be wiped out in the blink of an eye.
Galaxy 445 contact Anchorage Center on 121.4. Good day. Galaxy 445, please acknowledge.
Going to 121 decimal for BLXC 445. Anchorage Center, BLXC 445, 2,500 feet.
BLXC 445 Anchorage Center QNH 30.19er, continue as planned.
So we're just coming up to Atka Island here, which is going to be our destination. Now, it's a fairly large island. I think this is probably the largest in this particular part of the island chain. It continues along here. We're going to travel along. You can see this is 200 nautical miles across this map here. So we're traveling a fairly large distance. We curve up, and it'll be up just on this side of the actual airport. It's for more of a landing strip than a proper airport. Now, there is a large mountainous volcano, but it's on the northern side, so flying so low is not really going to be a concern at this point. Atka Island itself is quite small in terms of population. The city, or the town of Atka, I believe, latest the 2020 census showed there were 53 people living on the island, down from a high, you can call that, in 1880 census of 236 people. So it's been steadily decreasing. Back in 2000 it had 92 people, so it's dropped close to 50% of its population, 40% or so, in the last 20 years. So it is a steadily shrinking number of people, certainly not moving to it. Now, it's got a fairly decent spread of population. We're talking people from 30% of the population under the age of 18 and median age of 36. So not too bad in the grand scheme of things. It's not like we're talking a population of solely old people living on the island. So there is hope that the community will continue to thrive going into the future. Certainly a place I'd love to visit. Coming out to the Aleutians have always been something I've wanted to go and visit. I think I just have a personal love of these wild northern cold places. Things like Scandinavia, Iceland, getting over here, the Aleutians and Alaska, and I guess northern bits of Canada. I've always wanted to go and see and visit, so actually having a chance to fly over them is quite stunning. Now that a lot of the ice is lifted, so back there we've been flying over a lot of ice. Coming in now, the last island, and coming over here, really stunning. Looking at the scenery, there's a fair bit of detail considering that it's a population of 50 people living on this entire island. So good job, Bing, you've finally done something good.
Alpha Alpha Kilo, automated weather observation 1900 Zulu. Wind, calm. Visibility, tree in heavy rain. Sky condition, ceiling 600 feet overcast. Temperature, tree C, dew point 10 C, altimeter, tree 020. Papa Alpha Alpha Kilo automated weather observation 1900 Zulu. Wind calm. Visibility tree and heavy rain. Sky condition ceiling 600 feet overcast. Temperature tree C dew point 10 C altimeter tree 020. Papa Alpha Alpha Kilo automated weather observation 1900 Zulu. Wind.
Papa Alpha Alpha Kilo traffic BLXC 445 tree, 4 miles west, 2,500 feet, inbound to land runway tree 4.
In this case, the biggest takeaways are a very low cloud ceiling of about 600 feet. So we're going to definitely need to come in low before we actually begin to see the runway. Currently 2,500 feet. So seems to be fine for here, but I suspect as we come around, we're going to hit the what must be heavy rain clouds over there. Well, there we go. It'll be a nice, should be a nice landing. Certainly well lit, better than when we came into Shemya last night.
Papa Alpha Alpha Kilo traffic BLXC 445 4 miles south 1,500 feet inbound to land runway tree 4.
And coming into land now, I was a little bit too busy looking at something on my phone, and I didn't realise we were so close to the airport. So here we go. Again, don't ever have me as your pilot. We should come through this pretty well. Quickly make sure that, yep, the what they call the things are down. The landing gear. Come on in, as gentle as we can. And not quite centered on the runway, but good enough. And there we go, another beautiful landing. And with this one here, I don't think there's any way to taxi. Me closed up. I will just sit and zoom in on this and actually look at the airport. It looks like it'll do a full U-turn and head back to the other end. Easy enough. We'll just brake a little bit, slow down and head back. And of course then we'll start putting in some information into start filling out my calculation chart. So I'm very, very happy with the fuel. 55% was what I calculated, and I added an extra 5. So based on my calculations of 55, we would have 6% fuel remaining, which is enough, more than sufficient, but it is low enough that I would have been uncomfortable having that much fuel left. So 11% I feel is a comfortable margin, so I do like the fact that I rounded up an extra 5%, and I will have to factor that in. Again, we were not the most fuel efficient for this trip. We're doing quite a lot of climbing, a lot of low flying as well. Although I had a flight plan for 7,000, we did spend large portions of it well below that. But it was a beautiful flight. Once I got the sun up, I must have mistimed my my launch, my takeoff, but we did end up going nicely through the sunrise. I wonder if I'm meant to be taxiing on the side here, off the main part of the runway. I think I'll do that. Just out of good habit. Doesn't really matter. There's no planes coming in. It's always good to have good habits. God, this thing handles like an absolute whale on the ground. Okay, I'm happy with that. Throw the brakes on. And note we've got 11% fuel remaining, that's good. Let's flick off all of our masters. Shut down. Interesting, it didn't actually cut off again. Not sure why it does that. Sometimes it, maybe we're not parked in a proper area, but normally it'll end the flight for me. Either way, I can end this myself. We will head into the profile and go check it out. Okay, So we have a, what do we got here? So a little bit of nighttime, bit of daytime flying. 2 hours and 47. Now let's pull up my chart over here. We expected 2 hours and 47. That's not a bad flight time. It's 47 minutes. Perfectly acceptable. It is currently spot on midnight, or just after midnight. I'll do 12, 5 p.m. I've got my microphone in front of my keyboard, so it's a little hard to see. And our actual time then was just short of 3 hours, so 2 hours and 55 minutes flight time. So that includes taxiing and all the bits and bobs. Means we have a combined total time of what would that be? That would be 68 hours and 38 minutes. Beautiful. Yeah, never do math on stream. Okay, let's break that rule immediately. Calculator. Do some math. So I have a total of 832 kilometers. Divide that by approximately 3 hours. So let's do 2 hours and ballpark. Let's go 285 k's an hour. 85 kilometers per hour average. So that was a little bit slow. Do that correctly, about 3, yeah, okay. A little bit slow today. I guess we weren't, we didn't have a massive tailwind. There was a little bit of headwind at some points, and we were flying a hell of a lot lower, which lowers our speed. And we were down to 11%. I'm glad I remember that one. 11%. So we used there 49% fuel. Not bad. It's not bad at all. So we'll go 337, which is the maximum fuel load, multiplied by 49%. Equals 165.13. Total litres used. Now our kilometres per percent we got here. Got 832 kilometres divided by the number of percentage points, which was, what did I say? Calculate then 49%. So we actually got above average. So if I had put in the average amount of fuel, even not, again, like I said, I would have had 6% fuel remaining. So we did very nicely. We got 16.98. Very happy with that. So that was considered an average flight, and useful to know going forward. Now, of course, kilometers per litre. We have again 832 kilometers. We are now dividing by the number of litres of fuel we use, which was 165.13. We got 5.04 kilometers for every litre of fuel we burned, which is not too shabby at all. Now we're still using the American, let me just double check. United States today is 77.4 cents per litre. Okay, got here 165.13 litres multiplied by 77.4 cents equals 127.81 US dollars. 81. There we go. It's our current fuel cost. Things are looking good. Everything's been pre-filled, or everything's been filled out. We're looking good. We've arrived now at Atka. Well, next time we'll be heading off. Probably going to do. Let's jump back in for a second. Have a look while we're here. We'll consider what our next options are going to be. If I'm at Atka, which is just here, most likely next flight will involve going up. Pick it so I can actually look at the kilometers. Most likely going to involve flying up past Alaska, maybe have a look at the seagulls, find ourselves an airport. Maybe this one will do as a rough idea. Another 2-hour flight. We probably might even go up this a little bit further, depending on how things are going. Alternatively, detour over along these islands along here, add a little bit of extra time and distance, and probably land up at PAX. That'll be coming up tomorrow or the day after. So thanks very much for tuning in, and looking forward to seeing, well, my one viewer next time. Take care, guys.